As many of you know who've been watching the channel, USS KIDD is currently in Houma, Louisiana, undergoing a dry docking and hull work, which leaves our cradle empty, unless you believe the rumors that we have a stealth exhibit going on. Today, we figured we would answer a few questions that we've seen in the comments section. What's going on with the cradle? How are you funding this project? And we're going to do it on Museum Advocacy Day, which is a very important day for museums all across the nation. Join us and learn a little bit more behind the scenes. So right up off the bat, this is our cradle. You can't see the actual cradle that supports the ship because it's underwater, but these are the mooring dolphins to which KIDD is connected and to which her docking collars slide up and down as the river rises and falls. And there's a 40-foot difference between high and low water in Baton Rouge. It's not a tide, it's seasonal. It's from all the snow melt that comes down river in the spring. Now, some of your questions have involved when is the shipyard going to work on the cradle? And here's my answer. I don't know, but it's directly tied to when there's no water around the cradle. That will be coming, but it's not happening right now. A lot of people, going back in history a little bit, have thought that the KIDD was brought to Baton Rouge in 1982 through taxpayer money. That is not the case. It was a private fundraising effort. They raised all the money to get the ship here to Baton Rouge from Philadelphia, where she was laid up in the reserve fleet. But one of the very few, in fact, the first instance that the state ever gave money to the KIDD was in the construction of this cradle, this unique design back in 1982. There's other places that have done it since then, but in '82 it was unique to this one and only spot. It was in Ripley's, believe it or not. The state gave approximately $1.1 million to construct this cradle, and then the ship was brought in through private funding and docked, and from that point on, the state did not contribute funds to the museum until 2018. That's math. I'm not going to be able to tell you how many years that is off the top of my head, but it's a long, long time. It's decades. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further as we go in the video. So the cradle behind me is the first instance of the state participating in any sort of funding for this museum or this ship. Fast forward to the most recent funding of the museum from the state, and that is 42 years later in 2024 when we left for dry dock. Now, a lot of you have asked about the dry docking and how it's funded. The state of Louisiana has given a little over $10 million to take care of hull work on the KIDD and make sure that she's good and sound for hopefully another 42 years. But all of that is not going to be covered by state money. We're still fundraising, getting private funds. We're looking for corporate funds. So go hit that donate button at USSKIDD.com while you're watching this video. How did we get the funding from the state? Well, that comes about through proving our worth. And a lot of people, and this is where Museum Advocacy Day comes into play, a lot of people look at museums as always having their hand out. Every video you watch with me in it, I'm asking you for money. I'm asking you to donate.
Please, sir. I want some more.
And that's the impression a lot of people have, is museums are kind of leeches. They're always trying to suck your money away. But there's much more to it than that. The American Alliance of Museums, nationwide organization representing all museums in the United States and advocating for them, did a survey back in the 20-teens, and what they found was really impressive. If you took every museum of every type, children's museums, military museums, science museums, historic houses, plantations, any museum that you can think of, you put them all in a pot and combine all of their attendance for the year, we make more visitation, we have more people walking through our doors than every game played by every Major League Baseball franchise, Major League Hockey franchise, Major League Football franchise, and Major League Basketball franchise. Football, basketball, hockey, and baseball, the major leagues. We beat them, hands down. So to help them out a little bit, let's throw in amusement parks like Marvin's Gardens, like Six Flags, that sort of stuff. We still beat them. Throw in all the attendants. Are you ready for it? Brace yourselves, folks. Florida, Anaheim.
Brace yourselves!
We beat Disney as well if you've lumped them in with the major leagues. We beat the House of Mouse as far as attendance. And a lot of those major league sports franchises do get local and state funds, taxpayer dollars, whereas most of the museums are nonprofit and live off of what they can raise. That's an important fact for you to remember because your museums in your area need your help. So you're probably asking, Tim, why is this important? Why is the attendance thing important? Well, it's a data point that we can use to talk to folks who can help us get funding, whether they're in a corporation or whether they're in the legislature or the city council. Not only that, but how do I know this? I know this because I served as a volunteer board member for 7 years on the Louisiana Association of Museums, a smaller organization that advocates for all museums in the state of Louisiana. That's where I got this data from. How did it help us get dry docking? It got us money for dry docking because we were able to go to the legislature. We were able to make the case that you're not throwing your money down a hole. You're not throwing the taxpayers' money down a hole, which is what a lot of people think a ship or a boat is. It's a hole in the water that you throw money into. Not the case for a museum ship, because in addition to the attendance, AAM found that for every dollar of government funding that is put into a museum anywhere in the country, on the average, you get back $5 into the local economy. Now, how does that happen? Well, sales taxes through ticket sales or through museum store sales, payroll taxes. Myself and Molly, who's handling the camera, we have to pay payroll tax, or the museum pays payroll taxes. We have to pay taxes to the state every year on our incomes. So that's one way that the money goes from the museum back into the community. And as I said, AAM found for every $1, the museum puts back $5. Now, when we got ready to go to dry dock, we did our own economic impact survey for the area, and we found that KIDD beats that on the average. In particular, in 2018, we beat it by galactic proportions because that's when Greyhound came to film. Now, Greyhound had a budget of $54 million, and they came to film in Louisiana because of two things. Number one, and most importantly, the USS KIDD. They needed the KIDD to be able to film that movie. And then after that, they needed a place to do post-production. And they had Celtic Studios right down the road from us. So it was a perfect pairing. But they were coming to Louisiana because of us, and then they found out about Celtic, which just sealed the deal for them, along with economic incentives that the state has for movie productions. So $54 million came to the state of Louisiana in 2018 just because the KIDD was located here in Baton Rouge. So KIDD was a good investment, and we've had, in addition to that, we've had National Treasure film on board. We've had Molly's favorite, Sea of Madness, filming on board. We've had other movies, Battleship filmed on board, not as much as it filmed on Missouri and Hawaii, but they did film here for a day, and that brought money in, and then they used Celtic for post-production. So television and film are a great way for museums to bring money in and have an economic impact on their area. The state legislature looked at all of that and they said, we haven't put hardly any money into your location ever in its history. You've been self-sustaining for 42 years. This is a good investment. We're in. We're going to help you fix this ship. And that's how we got into dry dock. And that's how you'll help us get out of dry dock, because private funds, hit that donate button, will get us out of dry dock and get us back to Baton Rouge, and everything will be squeaky clean. The ship will be great. So just as an aside, nothing to do with Museum Advocacy Day, nothing to do with your questions in the comment section or dry dock or whatever, or the cradle. But for those who've never been here, here's a little bit more behind the scenes. Of course, you can see the walkway here that leads from the museum out to the ship. And Actually, this does tie into comment sections sometimes, because a lot of people wonder how we do stuff on the ship, how we get there. All of our electricity, all of our sewage, all of our fresh water, all of our telephone lines run under this walkway to this platform, which I don't know why it's called the spider, but it's called the spider. It's somebody way back in antiquity decided it looked like a spider standing up in the water on its legs.
Spider.
But as you can see, this is where the gangway connected, and the gangway is on a hinge. And this end is the stable element, and as the ship rises and falls, this remains steady, while the end touching the ship rises and falls with the ship. A lot of people, when we announced that we were going to dry dock, actually said, it doesn't matter, the kid can stay where she is, she doesn't need to go to dry dock because she'll never sink. They thought that even if she sat in the cradle, she would still be above water, you'd still be able to walk along the top deck and tour, even if you didn't get to go down inside of her. But I got news for you, the water, when the river is at its highest, is maybe about a foot away from the top of this post. And when we're on the ship and in the cradle, we're looking up at these posts. We're not looking across at it, we're looking up. So Kid would go underwater if we didn't fix her. Highest I've seen the water on the levee is the third step down from the top of the levee. And that is the point at which the Army Corps of Engineers will open I was about to say the Bonicari Spillway, but that's down in New Orleans. That does nothing for us. The Morganza Spillway, which is upstream of us, and that diverts water into the Atchafalaya Basin to the west, and it goes down the Atchafalaya to the Gulf of Mexico. And it just floods this 20-mile basin, 20 miles across, and 100 miles maybe or more to the Gulf. And that takes the pressure and off of the levees here and keeps the river at a lower level. So we've got the first point at which the state gave us funding in 1982 with the cradle. We got the most recent one in 2024 where they're helping us with dry docking. Let's rewind a little bit and see what other points where we've received government funding. The next point would be 1983, but it wasn't state funding. It was actually federal funding when we received a federal grant from the Great River Road Commission to build our museum building with a big dump truck right in front of us. The Great River Road Commission handles historic properties all up and down the length of the Mississippi River, from Minnesota all the way down to Louisiana. And they were kind enough to give us a grant which allowed us to construct a shoreside museum, a 2-story feature that you see here behind us. I love it or hate it. There's times where it's not that great. There are times where it is great, but that's all buildings. And this is what allows us to be able to interpret things that don't necessarily go aboard the Kidd and allow us to keep the Kidd as a time capsule for 1945. So that little bit of funding helped us achieve that. So fast forward from 1983, 36 years from our founding, in 2018, the state steps in to help us with our HVAC system, our air conditioning system. Now, an air conditioning system is very important to a museum because you've got to maintain climate control so that your artifacts do not deteriorate, your collection doesn't go away.
That belongs in a museum.
And in 2016, one of our chillers in our chiller yard back here behind us died. And we foot up the money ourselves to replace one of those chillers and cover the installation cost. 2 years later, the next chiller went down. And at that point, the state looked up, looked at its records and said, you know what? We haven't given you any money since you first got here. And you've handled hurricanes, you've handled, just general maintenance of this place by yourself with no government funding all this time. We're going to help you out. And so they funded the replacement of our second chiller, a water pump, and the VAV boxes, which if you don't know what those are in the ductwork of the building, and as the air passes through, it either cools it down or it heats it up at whatever temperature is needed for that particular location in the building. And keeps your climate control, keeps your humidity down. And so they helped us do all that, put in new controls for it. Instead of the old pneumatic controls, we now have digital controls. And that was the next infusion of state funds 36 years after the KIDD came to town. All right, so we're on the roof of the museum building, and if you pan out to the side here, you can see where we just were in relation to where we are now. We're on top of the museum building, and the KIDD normally would be sitting right on this side of those two mooring dolphins with the gangway at the end of the walkway where you see the little striped barricade. The gangway would be starting there going down to the ship. So fast forward from 2018 to 2024, late 2024, and our next project comes up, which is the roof of the building. The building had not had a new roof since it was built in 1983 through 1985. So original build, we're beginning to get leaks. And right around the time that we were talking about getting funding for the dry docking, we were talking about getting funding for the roof repair. And the state said, yes, this is necessary. You're going to get water intrusion on your artifacts, on your archives, your exhibits. That's not acceptable for a museum. We need to replace this roof for you. And so it took a little while to get underway. The dry dock actually beat it into occurring, but the roof is now being repaired, and that is our fourth instance of state funding coming to the museum in 42 years. And 3 of those instances were just within the past 7 years. So for all of that time in between, KIDD has been self-sufficient as was outlined by the charter that created us, Act 415. Originally, the state was not even allowed to give us money. There was a line item in there that said, after the cradle, no funding coming to this museum in perpetuity, no taxpayer dollars. And a little tidbit for you, the thing that changed that, because we wouldn't be able to have dry docked the ship this year without that help, occurred because of Hurricane Gustav in 2008. Right over here, you can't tell it now, just like you can't tell where the kamikaze hit on the ship because it's been repaired. But when Hurricane Gustav roared into town in August, September of 2008, it ripped the corner of this penthouse here off. It ripped the corner of the other end of the penthouse off, and you had a gigantic hole going right into our HVAC area on the roof. There's another HVAC area out behind the building. Ripped vents off the top of the roof and strew them all across the levee behind the building. We fixed that. The museum fixed that without asking for government funding. So the fact that we have been able to do so much on our own and take care of ourselves really helps the state say, you know what? We're going to give you a hand, and we appreciate that very much. So what is all of this about? It starts with, again, with Museum Advocacy Day. What can you do for Museum Advocacy Day? Well, Museum Advocacy Day is built up to support and bring awareness to museums around the country. And the way you can help is to advocate for your museum. Write to your mayor, write to your city councils, write to your parish presidents or county, whatever is in counties. I don't know what's in counties because Louisiana has parishes. But write to your state senators and representatives, write to your governor, write to your congressional delegation, your senators and representatives in DC, and let them know that museums are important to you and that the government should consider helping museums when and where they can. Now, we're not saying make all museums government supported. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make sure that the helping hand, like the KIDD has had 4 times over 42 years, that helping hand is there for all museums whenever they need it, because museums are very important to your community. If you've ever seen these online articles, Bloomberg, Bloomberg's 25 best cities to live in, 25 best places for businesses to open, Bloomberg's happiest cities in America. Bloomberg compiles data from all around the country to make these surveys. And one of the biggest data points for knowing a good place to live, if you're moving across the country, one of the things that Bloomberg looks at is museums, because a healthy museum community in a city or in a region talks about how well the population is taken care of in that geographic area. Museums, I'm sure everybody watching has gone on a field trip in grade school, in middle school, in high school to a museum. We are adjutants, we are assistants, we are resources for educators, and we are a place that families go to learn and have fun together. And that's what museum advocacy is about. You talk to your government officials and you let them know that you support these resources for your community. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that it's been educational. My name is Tim Nesmith. I'm with the USS KIDD. And remember, if you didn't hear any of this video, then you've heard me say this before. The USS KIDD Veterans Museum is a non-funded state agency that receives no regular state or federal funding. Notice that regular, you know what I mean now by watching this video. To support the KIDD, you can go to www.usskidd.com and donate there. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching. Remember, share, subscribe, and like, and we'll see you on the next video.